So basically, when someone asks me what I do for a living, I tell them I'm a professional caveman. I try and teach people how to incorporate caveman activities into their lifestyle because a lot of the modern health issues are the resultant of the bodies or the world we evolved for is not the world we live in now.
On Connecting the Dots, we aim to redefine what the term healthy means by learning from experts, identifying different areas of our life that impact our well being, and becoming our greatest health advocates.
We believe that by making small lifestyle changes, people can not only manage, but also prevent a wide range of chronic illnesses we are taught to believe are normal in our society today.
My name's Kathleen Carney. I'm a nutritionist, foodie, author, and creator and co-host of this raw, real, and sometimes ridiculous show.
And I'm Melissa Chamis, the other half of Connecting the Dots. I'm also a certified yoga instructor, Reiki 1 practitioner, and a hustler just trying to survive in corporate America.
We're close friends who bonded over our messy healing journeys and are eager to share our experiences with you.
So come join this journey with us as we all learn to connect the dots between the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of being human.
We now know that 80% of the reason why people go to the doctor's office is because of stress. It's a stress-induced illness.
So if we want to be working on healing the body, the gut and the brain have to be worked on together.
People get sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Never accept that, oh, I'm just always going to be this way, because there's always something you can do about it.
So make one lifestyle choice after another and do it with support.
The future of health looks like prevention.
It's going to be more common for everybody to have their own customized health plan.
Our health is no different than the health of the planet.
It's never too late to feel great.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Connecting the Dots. I am so excited to share some news with you and of course to introduce our guest and intro the episode. But to start, we have some really good news. As you might have seen on social media, we've been moving up the rankings on Apple Podcasts in the alternative health category, and that is solely because of you guys. So thank you so much. Thank you for rating the show, leaving reviews, listening, sharing it with your friends and family. All the things that you do to get the podcast to more ears is truly paying off. We are so close to breaking that top 100 on Apple Podcasts. And I'm hoping that we start to see the same metrics on Spotify and other streaming platforms like YouTube that we have been putting the show out on that we know that you are using and listening to. So our ask is please keep doing what you're doing on whatever streaming platform that you listen. Please rate, review, share, comment, like, subscribe, do the things.
Yes, and watch our YouTube, like Kath said, trying to get more people to go there. And now that this season we have videos, we would love to see you there. And we are going to try to do more Q&As there, as we did for Dr. Tanya Painter's episode we mentioned last week. So yeah, and continue to let us know your feedback, good or bad. We want to continually grow and make this podcast better for all of you listeners. So any topics that you want to hear, any questions you want answered, anything you want us to improve on, we are happy to help.
Yeah, send us a DM, an email, a chat, a text, however you communicate with us. Please let us know what you think. And as Melissa said, it doesn't always have to be positive. We are constantly looking to improve. There's so much more room to grow, and we want to hear what you think. We want to talk about what you want to hear. So with that, let's get into today's episode, which actually is a topic that was requested. So like I said, we listened to you. Luke, my boyfriend, and his friends are really into hunting and are interested in learning about going back to a more caveman lifestyle. And our guest this week really talks about that. And on last season of Connecting the Dots, a lot of listeners were super interested in what my cousin Brian eats in the off season from the NFL. And he was talking about how he basically follows this caveman style of eating a lot of meat, fish, veggies, sweet potatoes. I think in the episode said he's like so tired of sweet potatoes, but you understand that that's kind of the way of eating, like what you can get from the land. And so we really wanted to have a guest on the show who could talk about eating food from the earth and from this planet and utilizing everything that our environment has to offer. So we knew talking to an expert like Mark would appeal to some of our listeners, but another reason that we both wanted to have him on the show was because he has a PhD in physical organic chemistry and he's also an herbalist. And you know, Melissa and I love when we have people on the show who combine science with those holistic health practices.
Yeah, so Dr. Mark Merriwether Vorderbruggen is often described as a scientist raised by wolves. He has an MS in medicinal chemistry and a PhD in physical organic chemistry. So he brings science into the world of wild, edible, and medicinal plants. And on the science side, he actually has 16 patents and numerous articles in research journals from his career as a research chemist. In 2008, he started his website, Foraging Texas, which has become one of the top wild, edible, medicinal plant sites on the internet. And he's also written 2 books. One of them is called Idiot's Guide Foraging, and the next one is Outdoor Adventures Guide Foraging. And then in 2020, he became a medicine man for Medicine Man Plant Co., where he uses ancient plants to help with modern issues. And speaking of his company, Medicine Man Plant Co., Dr. Mark was generous enough to be giving away his brain pill and his gut pill. So he explains what those are in the episode. But we are going to be doing this giveaway on Instagram the week the podcast goes out. So if you are listening to it the week it comes out, go head to our Instagram, follow us on connectingthedots.podcast, and we will be posting the instructions for that giveaway. But part of the reason why I loved this conversation with Mark is, again, I'm a science nerd. So all of the data, all the information, I love hearing about how all of these things work, not just that they work, but how and why and what specifically it does. And he gives so many useful tips in this episode, but a lot of them are really easy to implement, just super simple, like things you could do even just walking outside on uneven ground. And he explains also why that is helpful and where that comes from. So it just brings everything back to the basics, back to eating what you can hunt and what you can grow in hunter-gatherer society, and really just kind of goes back into that. And I just really appreciated learning from him. And then he has also a lot of great stories to share from his personal experience that were just really funny and also really relatable. So I know you guys are going to enjoy this episode for sure.
So many good stories. I feel like with every question we asked him, he was like, well, can I tell this story? And we were like, please, yes. So yeah, it's literally like having a conversation with a friend. And for those of you who know me, you know that I am not the outdoorsy type, but he literally influenced me to buy his book about foraging, and I'm into plants now. So he's a miracle worker. And as Melissa said, we are giving away his brain pill and his gut pill from Medicine Man Plant Co. And one of the things that you'll hear in this episode, because we ask him specifically about these 2 products, is why did he choose the ingredients for them? What do they do? How do they help the gut? How do they help the brain? And you can just hear how much intention he puts behind his products. And not only does he have so much intention behind the products that he helps create, but also the brand Medicine Man Plant Co. that he helped create. And I just wanted to point out something that he sent to us in an email that I thought was so fascinating, which is the face of Medicine Man Plant Co. is actually from a forensic reconstruction of a skull found in Eastern Europe from a human that died approximately 100,000 years ago. And so what he said was, this is kind of a reconstruction of what we all looked like in the beginning before we ended up isolated and adapting to the new zones around the world. So truly, we're getting that caveman hunter-gatherer experience in this conversation and with his company, Medicine Man Plant Co. So with that, we are going to go into our ads. As a nutritionist, I really enjoyed learning even more about certain foods and herbs from Mark. After our conversation, I dug into the research to see how I could utilize certain supplements and ingredients with clients. At Kathleen Carney Wellness, I take an integrative and holistic approach to health and wellness, using the best of what I learned in graduate school, from my supervisors, and alternative health practices I've studied along the way. I treat every client as an individual and create customized health plans to help them work towards their goals. You can book a free discovery call with me by going to kathleencarney.com/services.
In this episode, we basically talk about utilizing everything available to us on this planet, from foraging to eating nose to tail. One of the reasons that we love Energy Bits is because each tablet is full of nutrients that come straight from the earth. Energy Bits tablets only contain 1 or 2 ingredients, spirulina and chlorella. The tablets are perfect to add to our smoothies, lattes, trail mixes, and more to feel confident that we are getting all the amazing benefits and nutrients that we need to stay healthy. So, to purchase spirulina and or chlorella Energy Bits tablets, head to the link in our show notes and use code CTD to get 20% off your order. Enjoy the episode.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mark, so much for being on Connecting the Dots today. We are so excited to have you and to talk about all the incredible work that you do. But before we get started, we like to start off with an icebreaker. So we are wondering, what is something that you're reading, watching, or listening to?
Oh man. So because of everything I'm involved in, it's hard to find time, but How to Hack Humans.
Love that.
Yeah. So it's basically with businesses, how to tell a story. You don't sell detailed statistics of, like computers and so forth. You need to interact with the consumer, make them the hero of their journey and slaying whatever dragons you're helping them slay, sort of thing. So I like that approach to life in general, really. I mean, why have a boring life when you can frame it in something grandiose? And so this helps me help other people frame their lives in more grandiose natures, no pun intended. So
I love that. We'll have to check it out.
Yeah,
it's pretty good. I do a lot of mentoring and so forth, and I always joke that I will teach them the Jedi mind tricks they need to get ahead. And this just added a whole bunch more Jedi mind tricks to the the repertoire.
I love it.
That's amazing.
All's fair in love and business.
Makes the world go round.
Oh, heck yeah.
All right. So can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your health journey and how that led you to where you are today?
Oh, yeah. So let's start where I am today, and then we'll go back to the very beginning. So basically, when someone asks me what I do for a living, I tell them I'm a professional caveman. I try and teach people how to incorporate caveman activities into their lifestyle, because a lot of the modern health issues are the resultant of the bodies, or the world we evolved for is not the world we live in now. And so there's a lot of evolutionary things that served us very well 100,000 years ago that are now messing us up. But then to go very, backwards to the very beginning, how this all started, my earliest memories were out collecting wild plants with my mom, my dad, aunts, uncles, grandparents, things like that. Just it was something we did, wild plants for food and for medicine. It just seemed perfectly natural. The scientist side, if you're born knowing you're going to be a scientist. One of my other memories, and this is actually kind of a bad memory, but I'm going to share it with you anyway, is being very excited in first day of first grade, when the teacher announced that we're going to head to the laboratory. And it's like, yes, a laboratory. This is exactly what I wanted to do. And we line up, and actually what she had said was the lavatory. And so, I walk into the bathroom, it's like, this is not what I expected. But yeah, my career path, originally I was planning on being a medicinal chemist. So I have a master's in medicinal chemistry, a PhD in physical organic chemistry. So not making molecules, but finding the molecules man and God have created to solve humans' ills. I was blessed having research advisors that were big into natural products. Here's the secret. So plants are lazy. And so they come up with molecules that are very easy to make, but have really amazing powers. So if you're going to copy or create medicinal molecules, going back to what the plants did is much easier when you're sitting down with what's called the chemical engineers who are actually building the chemical plant to make these molecules. Because it's simple. You lock this to this to this, poof, it's done, as opposed to all these other exotic sort of chemical reactions that are needed. So I'm not going to say I'm lazy. I'm very efficient with my time and my resources and my energy. And so nature was kind of a guide in that. But this led to a deep understanding of natural products and plants in general. When I moved down to Texas in 1997, I was also big into hiking and backpacking and camping and all this sort of thing. There wasn't a good one single website where you could go and learn all the different wild things you can do in Texas. So being lazy, I decided I'm going to build one. So it's there. And I built one. But what really got people interested was on the blog side, when I was talking about some of the different wild edible and medicinal mushrooms and plants I was finding, to the point where people said, hey, will you go camping with us next week and show us some of these plants and mushrooms? Like, yeah, sure, I'll go do that. Kind of worried my wife. It's like, you're going out in the woods with strangers. Bad people don't go into the woods. It's a very low target rich environment. They want me for my brains, not my money, because I got none. That led to organizations like the Houston Arboretum, the Museum of Natural Science, different historic sites around Texas, all saying, hey, will you teach wild edibles for us? And that completely took over my life. So I was traveling all over, teaching the wild edibles, teaching medicine making classes. Then in 2020, I was actually approached by two guys doing a startup for Medicine Man Plant Co. And they were looking for an authentic medicine man. And they decided I fit the bill because I lived and breathed the wild, and I've been teaching thousands of people. I have a good following. So they thought, hey, this makes sense. And here we are today. I guess. But in my study of ancient foods and medicines, that's what led me to understand the health issues that we are suffering now, being a result of the world we evolved to be in is not the world we live in. So, and I can go on that, but I'm going to wait for you to ask me specific questions now.
I was going to
You've been
say,
patiently waiting.
So many different ones to go off of. But first, you had mentioned your background in education, which Melissa and I, when we were reading your bio, just thought it was so fascinating and very impressive. But one of the things that stood out to us was that not only are you a chemist, but you're also an herbalist. And I feel like that totally tracks with your love for helping people find wild edibles and medicine making and all of that. But when did you decide to add herbalism into your practice? And how do you think that makes you, a better teacher and medicine man?
Okay. So we have to go some history here again. There was a wild food author by the name of Yule Gibbons back in the late 60s, early 70s. And he had books like Stalking the Wild Asparagus and Stalking the Healthful Herb. And he had put forth a theory that the medicinal benefits from plants weren't so much medicinal compounds, more so they were just really high in nutrients. And so when someone was ill, for most of our history, we were malnourished. And by giving them these extra plants with higher nutritional value, just allowing the body to finally have the resources to apply to healing was a thing. He was a wonderful man, a brilliant man in the world of foraging and wild edibles. But this actually set the science back some because everyone said, yeah, that's it. There's no medicine in plants. And it really wasn't until the 80s when a number of researchers started looking, there's all this traditional medicine. There's Vedic, there's traditional Chinese, there's South American, there's Native American, all these. And quite frankly, the oldest written record of herbal medicines is Sumerian cuneiform clay tablets. We have over 600 of these from over 4,000 years ago. So, from as long as we've been making marks that mean something, we've been recording the medicinal plants that they were using. And so they just said, well, let's look into it. And that's when they really started realizing, yeah, there are a lot of amazing molecules that actually have biochemical powers in the body. It's not just caffeine and marijuana that are plant-based alterants. There's all this other stuff. And that's what really set me on the path, because as a scientist, I need scientific data. And since the 80s, there's been an explosion of studies into that. Most of them say, yeah, there's some here. There's actually power here. We can figure out the actual mechanism of what it's doing in the body and all that. That's great. Those are the ones I love because I need to know for sure what's going on. And especially if I'm going to recommend something to someone else, I need the pathways. I need statistically accurate proof that this stuff is doing what it's doing. So that's kind of what I bring into it, the herbalist side. It's like I started out as a medicinal chemist and then thought, wow, all these plants have such amazing powers. And then focusing in on that. Whereas a lot of herbalists, I love you guys out there. I love you, but crystals, not sold on crystal magic yet. Okay. I'm just going to put it right out there. So there's that side of things.
So I definitely relate. Well, I definitely relate with you on that because I was a math major, so I have like the math science brain. So I'm very like statistically driven, and now I'm getting into crystals. But for me, if I don't fully experience it, I can't get it. So it's like I have to experience it to fully understand a lot of those things. So I think that's amazing that you have all those different areas of expertise that you can bring into this one practice. So I'm curious. So for the listeners who don't know what foraging is, can you kind of give a brief overview on what that is?
Yeah. So forager was basically the grocery store before there were grocery stores. So in the early eras of humans, we got all our stuff from the wild. Even before agriculture, we were still eating. So it was just the gathering the edible and medicinal plants and mushrooms around us that nature provided for free. And I'm still doing that. I still go out, just about every weekend and do plant walkabouts, or I teach people, okay, in this area, you can eat this, you can eat this, you can eat this. Don't eat that. This is okay, and just reattaching them to nature through the foods and medicines of our ancestors.
How did you learn what plants were safe to eat versus what plants were unsafe? And also like where were locations where you could forage and could not?
Oh, that's a great question. So a lot of it started out from my family. Like I said, my mom, my dad, my grandparents, aunts and uncles, and just learning up in Minnesota where I was from, all the nuts and berries and weeds and stuff that were edible. When I moved down to Texas, I realized that there is some differences. A lot of the wintertime weeds in particular, like the dandelion and the wild violets and things, they were wintertime plants down here. So I had to learn the summertime plants. That being said, there's still a lot of ethnobotanical records on this. So what did the first people in the area eat? What did the pioneers eat? Up until here I'm going to say HEB showed up, but I guess the first grocery store I think was Piggly Wiggly. But until that, a lot of our stuff came from the wild plants. It was common knowledge, and luckily a lot of it had been passed down. And then a generation ago, people started realizing maybe we should write this down. So just working with the different foraging instructors and reading their books and so forth. Sam Thayer is huge up there. Ellen Zakos, Karen Stevenson, there's a bunch of them around. Reading, experimenting. People ask. Another embarrassing story here. Have I ever poisoned myself on a plant? And it's no, because I'm very careful. I spend a lot of time properly identifying it. Then going through, I have a huge library of ethnobotanical books and records and foraging books, and go through. Has someone eaten this multiple times? And so I've never poisoned myself on a plant or mushroom. The only time I ever had a problem was when I expanded into insects. And so I was on a canoe trip and we put ashore, and there were these giant slow moving grasshoppers, and they were really easy to catch. And I thought, well, let's give it a try, because, honey and locusts, let's, tap our inner John the Baptist, I guess, and roasted them up, and they were delicious. They actually tasted like steak. And then things got a little weird, not like tripping or anything like that, but it turns out that this was an eastern lubber grasshopper, and its main source of food was poison ivy. So they are loaded with the poison ivy. And I will say poison ivy of the stomach is a very interesting
Oh my
thing.
God.
So
Sounds very uncomfortable.
yeah.
You have
But
to just like drink ointment? What do you
yeah,
do?
basically, milk of magnesia, white clay, and just wait it out.
Wow.
Luckily, I have a pretty robust system, and it was only like 2 days, and then it was gone. But I learned my lesson. Study the bugs just as much as you study the plants.
That's so interesting. So
So-
I'm curious, what other bugs have you eaten and have nutritional value?
Oh, scorpions are awesome. Like the wood scorpions around here, those are delicious. You cut the last joint off where the poison sac is, and then you just throw them in a pan, fry them up, and they taste, it's going to sound weird, but it tastes like a mixture of shrimp and cheese, but it actually works. And then also June bugs. They're another, I refer to June bugs as really dumb shrimp. Again, a lot of the insects have shrimp-like flavors, because shrimp is basically in that same crustacean bug category. So, and then in China, when I was there, I have no clue what all I ate there. It just showed up on the plate and away we went. So mealworms, I think, were in there, giant centipedes, hornworm caterpillars, zebra slugs, banana slugs, escargot, but that's French. So,
Wow.
things like that. The things we used to eat.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I could ever think of shrimp the same way now. I think I'm just
sorry.
gonna imagine scorpion.
I will eat your
hilarious.
shrimp. The little pill bugs too, yeah.
That's really fascinating though.
It's what we did. So I actually, for my health, I do what I call an ancestral diet. So the fewer machines that touch your food, the better off you are. So processed foods, that sort of things are out. But when I go ancestral, it's when it comes to animals, it's nose to tail. So the organ meats are just as important as the muscle. As they're loaded with nutrients. That's what we evolved. I mean, if you look at the FDA, they gives you this list of, vitamin A, vitamin C, these minerals. This is how much you need. And people seem to think that's all we need. But what that is if you don't get those specific 24 compounds, you start showing signs of their lack right away. Within like 2 weeks, you start showing nutritional deficiencies. The question is, what about long term? Over the years, over the decades, if you're not getting certain things, is that leading to its own issues in the body? And more, it looks like that's probably the case. So different proteins and salt and all this sort of stuff. I think there's enough evidence now that it makes it worthwhile to be a caveman eater, nose to tail, plants. And you might have heard the phrase, let food be thy medicine. One of the things I teach during my foraging class is let gathering food be thy medicine. Because when you're out foraging, it's not pushing a cart down a grocery store. You're bending, you're stretching, you're carrying. Occasionally, you're running very fast, but you're doing full body movement. It's like CrossFit or Pilates out in the woods, and they've shown there's all sorts of health benefits from being out in the woods. And I can lecture for hours on why you should be out in the woods, how it helps you mentally and physically and spiritually and everything else. So I'm just hoping you'll ask me. And it's all science-based too. So
Yeah, I mean, everything that you said, I feel like is just like little connections being made in my brain from like eating organ meats. I am just finishing up my master's in nutrition, and for like every vitamin and mineral, it's like beef liver is like number one in so many of the key nutrients. So when you said that, that came up for me. And then of course, throughout the season of the show, when we've asked people, oh, well, what can you do to decrease stress or improve your immune system or all these things, people are like, get outside, be outside, don't eat processed food. So I can only imagine the benefits of getting that food for yourself, being in nature, and then eating it. So I'm curious if you have any other benefits that you can share with our listeners on foraging and gathering.
Okay, I'm so glad you asked. So now we have to go to Japan. And if you know anything about the Japanese demographics, you know they're basically screwed. They have a whole bunch of old people and very few young people. Their pyramid is inverted. And they saw this coming 30 years ago. So they put a lot of effort into what can we do to maintain the overall health of our elderly population so that they're not so much of a drain on the resources of the younger one. One of the top things they found was the more time a person spent walking around on uneven ground, the healthier they were mentally and physically. And these benefits stuck with them into old age. So as you're walking around on uneven ground, where we evolved to walk on, where roots and rocks and mud and all this sort of thing, your brain is constantly analyzing what's going on. It's fully engaged in sensing what's going on. Where you find uneven ground is outside, unless you have a very old house. But you're outside. So while you're outside, not only is the brain studying the terrain through your feet and analyzing how to move the body across it, it's also listening for resources. It's looking for resources. It's smelling for, I should say, resources and threats. Our brains evolved. We are amazing at finding resources. That's what allowed us to spread all around the world, go to the moon, because we have this ability to look at something and see not what it is, but what it could be. So when you're out in the wild, you are constantly scanning. Ooh, is that a rock I could use? Ooh, is that a stick I could use? You're also touching things, you're smelling things. They've found that the more you're out in nature, your sense of smell improves. If you look at the different, like the hunter-gatherer tribes that are around, they have amazing senses of smell, because that's one of the ways we would find resources and threats. Ooh, I smell a mountain lion. I don't want to be here, sort of thing. Feeling the wind across our skin tells us which direction the wind is coming. That's another thing very crucial for recognizing, again, threats in particular. But all the stimulation is going, but the starting point is just walking on uneven ground. Because as you're doing that, like I said, your body is analyzing that. Huge amount of exercise. The brain is evolved to receive all this information, analyze it, and make use of it. So if you're just sitting on a couch watching YouTube videos, you're not stimulating your brain. So, but again, back to uneven ground. You're walking on uneven ground. To maintain your balance requires your core muscles. So the more uneven ground you're walking on, they've shown there's a greater strength in the core muscles. There's a direct correlation between health and core muscle strength. Also, the sense of balance improves. And as you get older, then you are less likely to fall and break a hip. basically, if you fall and break a hip after the age of 70, it's pretty much a death sentence. But they found just the years of walking on uneven ground strengthens the natural balance. And so the people that did a lot of that were less likely to fall and break a hip. Bicyclists are pretty much the only other people that show that long-term effect and sense of balance to reduce the chance of a broken hip.
I was going to say, I think I've seen the study that you're mentioning or one similar about uneven ground because I was researching preventing osteoporosis, or if you have osteoporosis, how to, decrease your chances of, like you said, falling and breaking a hip. And that was one of the things that I found. That's so crazy. And
well, and then also bone density too. As you're walking, as the muscles get stronger, the bones need to maintain their strength too. So, yeah, that's if I could only give one health tip to people, it would be walk around outside, because not only are you getting that, they've shown it strengthens the immune system. That all that brain stimulation that you're getting has been shown to reduce anxiety and attention deficit disorder type stuff, because the brain is finally getting what it's supposed to be getting rather than junk. So, yeah,
I've never heard of that study, but I think it makes so much sense. And I used to teach yoga, and I think one of the most important things is learning balance. And obviously there is the flexibility aspect, but like there's a difference between passive and active flexibility, and really engaging those muscles and strengthening those like stabilizers in order to kind of protect your bones and your muscles and prevent injuries. But I also think walking around, like you were saying, like having to be so fully present in that moment, it's almost like Kath, I know, loves walking around as her form of meditation. It's like a mindful meditation, but with movement. But yeah, no, that's awesome. So I'm curious if, when it comes to foraging, if there's certain like rules or do's and don'ts that
and so yeah, so whenever I start my class, it starts with the rules and ethics of foraging, and I say there are 4 things you need to respect. You need to respect the law, you need to respect the land, you need to respect the plant, and you need to respect yourself. And each state has different laws. Here in Texas, actually foraging is not allowed on most public properties. So state parks, city parks, things like that. This goes back actually to the sheep and cattle wars of the 1800s, when the sheep and cattle ranchers were killing each other over letting their animals graze on the public property because it was allowed. And the Texas government did what every parent does when kids are squabbling. Say, okay, fine, no one gets it. And locked it away. So like here in Texas, the only places you're allowed to actually legally forage, well, private property with the owner's permission, Texas roadsides, because it still goes back to, horses and so forth. They had to be able to graze along the roadside. So that is still open for people to forage along roadsides. I recommend backcountry roads without a lot of traffic. Getting hit by a truck sucks. So you want to keep that in mind. And then in the national forests, you are allowed to harvest 1 gallon of mushrooms per person per day for private use. And there are some other state parks and stuff here where the park superintendent has opened it up to foraging under very specific conditions. And then one thing I've been working on is there's a thing called HipCamp, hipcamp.com. It's like Airbnb for private campgrounds, where people with ranches or farms or large tracts of land will let you come and camp on it for a small fee. And so I've been reaching out and trying to build up a network of campgrounds that will offer foraging as one of the things you can do on their property, because a lot of them have like a pond where you can fish, or they'll have chickens where you can get a dozen eggs for $4, and llamas you can pet, things like that. So there's already a mechanism in place where the HipCamp operators can offer things beyond just a spot of land. And so far the reception for that has been very positive. So
that is so cool. I just wrote that down. I want to check that out and do that. That's sick. So we love to make things tangible for our listeners. So if a listener is like, okay, I want to improve my balance, I want to stress less, I want to get exercise, be fit, and eat food from the earth, what are like the first few foraging steps that they could take?
Okay. Shameless product promotion.
We
So
love
my recent book, The Outdoor Adventures Guide Foraging, multiple pictures of the plant. One of the key things is there's a North American map which shows if for some reason you're not in Texas, where to find it, what states are it in. But big pictures, multiple pictures from different times of the year. So with a lot of the foraging books, they'll have one picture of the plant, usually the flower. And if you're looking any other time of the year, unless you actually know how to key out a plant, you're not going to be able to figure it out. But even before that, I got to say right now, people have it easy. The first step you should do is open your front or back door, whichever, stand and look around and see what trees are there. And you identify the trees. Google or iSeek, there's different apps now that you can take a picture of a leaf and it will tell you what tree it is. They're not completely accurate, but they get you close. But identify the trees. Then you go to Google or DuckDuckGo and type in oak tree edible medicinal and see what comes up. Probably my website, foragingtexas.com. But you can find out, okay, there's acorns and this is how I eat the acorns. And oh, the oak galls, those are really medicinal. Interesting. But you start with the trees because the trees are the easiest thing to identify. And by starting there, you get that immediate success where, hey, I have a maple tree. I can eat the seeds on this. Cool. You have some immediate successes, which trigger the dopamine rewards in your brain. Because if you take any foraging books and go, I'm going out in the woods and I'm going to find plants, you're screwed. You're not. I tell people, honestly, the best place to leave this book is in your bathroom, where every day when you're escaping from the kids or whatever, you can just focus in and study the plants and train your eyes to see it when you're out in the wild. So you start by, like I said, identifying the trees. Then you take pictures of all your landscaping plants, go to the local nursery, say, what is this? Write it down, back to the computer, Google, hosta, edible medicinal, Barbados cherry, edible medicinal, and find a lot of the landscaping plants actually have edible or medicinal properties. It's just no one uses them anymore. Yeah. But again, you're getting that dopamine win. You're finding out just the stuff around you, and you're on the path. Then you go down toward the weeds, and at that point, that's where my book and some of the others come in hand. You already have these successes that show you it's not as hard as you think. You've gotten over that initial fear barrier where you're just not ready to try it. You mentioned at the beginning here reading the book and so forth, but you're not quite ready to try it. The easy wins. Get those. Start with those. What is around you? Start in your doorstep. What's in your yard? What's in your neighbor's yard? What's up and down the street, where you can actually see the plants. And as you go through the different books and so forth, you can look at the very specific things the book or the website tells you to look at. One of the things that's been very beneficial over the years is all us foraging instructors and authors, we talk behind the scenes. We have a secret fungal network that we communicate through. But we've all focused on the same structural features of the plants for identifying them. So if I'm talking about an oak tree, I'm talking about the same parts of the oak tree as Sam Thayer or Ellen Zakos or Karen Stevenson or any of these people, so that you don't have to relearn all sorts of new stuff. And then even if they have plants in their book that I don't have in mine, again, it's how are the leaves arranged? What does the edge of the leaf look like? How many petals are on the flower? We'll give you that exact information to very quickly identify things. As a basic rule of thumb is you want 5 structural features on the plant to match whatever resource you're using to identify the plant. So proper plant identification is really important. Where you're harvesting it is very important. The other thing that is very, very important to me is harvesting the plants in sustainable manners. There's been a big problem, especially in California and New York, where they have more open foraging laws and a lot of fancy restaurants. A lot of restaurants now like to pride themselves on what they call only here, only now meals, where they incorporate a bunch of wild foods. And basically, you show up at the back door with a bag of something, and the chef hands you $100 bill and no questions asked. And the end result of this is a number of parks in those areas are being stripped of plants, the edible and the medicinal. Same with some herbal shops. No questions asked. Hey, you got slippery elm? Awesome. There's a huge problem in Louisiana with slippery elm tree rustling. People will sneak into the national forest, cut down a slippery elm, strip out the bark, and sell it to the herbal shops. Wow. So things like that. So in a sustainable manner, if you go to the Foraging Texas website, each plant has an abundance code, which tells you how much of that plant you can take, so that year after year after year, it returns. And I tell people, if I ever feel like the Texas ecosystem is being damaged or stripped due to the foragers I've taught, I'm shutting everything down. My website is going away. I'm just going to go into the wild and make amends as best I can for for unleashing this horde of locusts upon people. And then the final is respecting yourself. So proper identification, 5 structural features. That's a big part of it, but also what may cause an ecosystem to render edible plants unsafe to eat. So different pollutions. So here in Texas, where I'm located, fire ants are a big problem. So a lot of places just broadcast fire ant killer all over the place. The fire ant killer is pretty much as bad for humans as it is for fire ants. Luckily, we are significantly larger than ants, but if we are eating foods that have been soaked in the fire ant killer, we are concentrating the dose. So the basic rule of thumb there is for any sort of pesticide or fungicide, whatever the active lifespan it says on the package, you have to double that. So like Andro once a year fire ant killer, 2 years before you can safely eat it. Another thing people don't realize, Texas is actually, there's a lot of iron mining, or there used to be a lot of iron mining, especially in East Texas. A lot of the iron for the early United States came from Texas. Wherever you have naturally large amounts of iron, you also get a lot of mercury. And so a lot down here we have what's called Davy Crockett National Forest. It is iron mining that was reclaimed and turned into a forest. So it used to be a forest, then the iron was discovered, it was stripped, it was mined, and then eventually they replanted trees and say, oops, sorry. The problem then, though, is that area is all contaminated with mercury. So old buildings built in the mid-70s or earlier, were often painted with a lead-based paint. And so the soil around the old buildings can be contaminated with lead. You don't want lead. One of the things that makes a lot of wild plants so nutritious is they are what are known as hyperaccumulators. So they're really good at sucking the iron and the magnesium and the calcium and the phosphorus and the potassium out of the soil, which is great for us. But if there's lead or mercury or arsenic, things like that, then there's a problem. So you kind of have to know the history of the land some, especially when dealing with private property, what may have been on the land that could be a problem. Either side of the sidewalk, we have a special name for that in the foraging world. That is the dog pee zone. So generally, yeah, you know, most like here, I think you can have a maximum 8-foot leash. You know, you want to go away from the sidewalks some, especially if you see people walking their dogs there every day. So things like that. So you kind of have to be aware of the world around you, which I see as a benefit. The more you know, the more you know. Simple as that.
This is so fascinating. Maybe everything you're talking about, and I live in New York City. I'm like, made me feel a little guilty living in New York City. Like, I think I need to step away.
So they've actually done studies in Boston and Minneapolis and St. Paul looking at the weeds growing in abandoned lots and sidewalks and so forth like that, with the assumption that they were going to be very contaminated with pollutants. They found that, at least in Boston and Minneapolis and St. Paul, that the plants were actually cleaner than the stuff in the grocery stores. There weren't any contaminants. They are not industrial cities. They are, frankly, information and financial cities. They're not producing a lot of pollution. Same with New York City. The abandoned lots and the cracks in the sidewalk, you may be looked upon a little kind of weird, but the plants should actually be quite safe as far as any contaminants.
I mean, I don't know if I trust anything in New York City, but I'm still going to look around because I'm very curious. That's very interesting. But I'm curious because you mentioned Foraging Texas, like your website, a few times. Can you talk about what that is and what information you have available on there?
Okay, so it's become kind of misnamed because, well, there's a couple of, so what, at the beginning, when I started teaching these classes, I decided it would benefit my students to have a website they could go to refresh their memory. So it went from 20 plants. Currently, there's 225 plants and mushrooms with multiple pictures of each, any sort of mimics you have to be worried about and how to tell the mimics from each other, the abundance code, range maps not only of Texas, well, Texas range maps at a county level, and North American maps at the state and Canadian province level. Because Texas has 14 different ecological zones. The only one that has more is California. And we also have the second most plant diversity. Again, second only to California, but pretty much every plant in the United States, except for very few, can be found somewhere in Texas. So this actually worked out really well because it's not just useful for Texans, it's useful for everyone across North America. That's why I put the North American range maps. But currently 225 plants, constantly adding more, multiple pictures, recipes, information, what time of year to look for it, what parts to use, what parts not to use, not just edible and medicinal, but is it good for cordage? Is it good for starting fires? Is it whatever, any sort of useful information, medicinal uses, all that sort of thing. Then there's, of course, lists of all the podcasts I've been on. I've been on a lot of podcasts, and each one is different. Recently, I was on the Women's Cornhole League podcast, speaking on how basically throwing things at stuff led to Shakespeare, and what. So things like that, and from an evolutionary basis. But in the end, it's trying, I look at it as the hook to get people more interested in the caveman lifestyle and easy things you can do. Cold showers, walking barefoot, walking on uneven ground, juggling, things like that. Just things you wouldn't think of as cavemen, but stimulate the body the way we evolved to move, to think, to interact. So ton of stuff.
That is awesome. And I mean, I've just started to, as I told you earlier, break into your book. But when you were saying that you have all this information about every plant on there, my boyfriend and I were looking at it, and just the part we were looking at acorns because that seemed, manageable for us. And just the steps that you have to take to, boil them and make sure that they're safe to eat and all the things, like you are so thorough. So anybody who's interested, definitely head to Foraging Texas. But wanted to switch the topic a little bit. Because earlier in your introduction, you kind of mentioned how learning about plants and how they can be used to help with modern issues that, we've caused as humans for ourselves. So can you give some examples of plants that might help heal or just support certain ailments or illnesses?
Okay. So, there's very common ones like turmeric. Turmeric is a very potent antioxidant. Everyone has heard about turmeric. A lot of people don't know that the body has a very hard time absorbing turmeric. So you have to take it with black pepper. As a nutritionist, you might have heard that. So the black pepper, basically what the black pepper does is it unlocks our digestive tract and moves it to the next level. making it absorb even more of the nutrients and stuff out of the food. Not just the nutrients we already don't have much problem with, but things we do have kind of a problem with. I like Rosella hibiscus. This is an African plant, but it's become a very common landscaping plant around here. You've probably heard of hibiscus tea. And what it does is it increases the nitric oxide levels in the body, which are a vasodilator. It basically causes your blood vessels to expand. What this does is it now becomes easier to pump the blood through it. If the pipe is bigger, to get the same amount of fluid through it, you need less pressure. So that's where we get the reducing the blood pressure type thing going on. Another one I like along those lines is ginger. Most people like ginger. Ginger is wonderfully tasty. One of the cool things that ginger has been shown to do is it helps convert the low density lipids into the high density lipids. The high density lipids are the good ones. I just had my yearly physical last week, and my doctor actually called me and said, Mark, I got to tell you, your cholesterol levels are high, but it's all the good stuff. I've never seen numbers like this. It's just very little of the low. It's all because for breakfast, I have 2 eggs cooked in a thick thing of bacon grease, and I pour the bacon grease on top of the eggs afterwards, because that is the animal fats, that is the natural stuff. Vegetable oil, no canola oil. Olive oil is on the border, but yeah, none of the rapeseed oil, none of that stuff. But cocoa butter, regular butter, bacon grease, are the big one. Those are the 3 essential oils, basically. So, but using that, but yeah, so ginger, including ginger. I have 2 teenage daughters who love their iced coffees, which is basically a little bit of coffee and a whole bunch of sugar and all this sort of thing. The requirement I have with them is you need to include cinnamon in that, because cinnamon has been shown to help reduce the blood sugar. It actually whereas black pepper is unlocking the digestive system, the cinnamon has been shown to make it harder for the glucose to pass from the digestive tract into the blood. It also has been shown to help reduce the insulin resistance. So if you're eating a lot of really sugary stuff, make it cinnamon rolls, make it, the cinnamon cookies, things like that. It'll help. One of my favorite though, and so we're going to go sideways here for a second, but bear with me. When a medicinal chemist is trying to find a new class of medicinal molecules, one of the things he or she will do is study a culture with a very specific food or foods diet that seem to be lacking a particular health issue that is found other places. A great example of this is the American Southwest. It was noticed a while back in the American Southwest that overall the incidences of cancer are lower than the rest of North America. And so they did a lot of time and study trying to figure out what's going on. They thought, well, is it genetic? It's not genetic. Anyone who lives there at least 10 years, their chance of cancer drops. They finally tracked it down to prickly pear cactus and the poles. The pads and the fruit of the cactus, there's something in it that reduces the risk of cancer. There's some amazing studies, and one I really like. There was bladder cancer. So bladder cancer, the bladder cancerous tumors in the bladder, they have a strong tendency to grow back. And so these researchers said, okay, we're going to take 100 people that recently had the tumors cut out, and there's a good chance that they're going to grow back. So let's see, they gave 50 of them a placebo and 50 of them just a freeze-dried powdered cactus pad in capsules. The plan was for the study to go 3 years and see what was going on. But after 18 months, the researchers themselves stopped it and said, we can't keep this going. This is immoral. In the people taking the cactus, there was no sign yet of any return of any cancerous stuff. In the people taking the placebo, somewhere close to 30% of them were already starting to show precancerous growths in just 18 months. And they said, as far as I'm concerned, the one thing, okay, walk outdoors and eat prickly pear cactus pads. Go get Goya Nepalis. You can get them in the jar with your 2 eggs in the morning, and you need the egg yolks for the cysteine that your liver needs to detoxify your body, cooked in bacon grease. Life is good. It's like my immortality breakfast right there.
I love that. One of my friends, she just recommended a prickly pear cocktail from a restaurant I like, so I will be having that too.
Anti-cancer cocktails.
We love it.
I'm pretty sure you just solved like our world's biggest issue, or at least our country's biggest
I'm
issue.
trying.
Like,
I'm trying.
so simple solutions here.
Yeah, I mean, it not 100% guaranteed no cancer, but it dramatically reduces, especially tumorous cancers. But they've shown, breast, colon, liver, kidney, bladder, not skin cancer, leukemia. They're still not sure on that one, but the tumorous ones, bone cancer, thyroid cancer, all those things. There's really good studies now that show prickly pear cactus in your diet. So I take about a quarter cup a day.
So even I'm guessing, because you said even people just living in the area showed lower signs of that.
10 years.
Not even like, even if you don't consume it, but if you're just surrounded by it.
I think it's almost hard to avoid it if you live in the American Southwest, is what it boils down to. Anytime you go out to eat, any nacho, or even nachos, salsa, burritos, it's going to be added in there. It's good stuff. Really? It's a very common food. I like them. Even before that, I liked them. So, and then because I'm assuming by the look on your face, you've never had prickly pear cactus. One of the things people find somewhat off-putting about it is it's pretty slimy. It has a lot of the mucilage in it. That mucilage, along with I don't know if they haven't figured out the exact mechanism of how this is working. But one of the things, the side property of mucilage or slimy foods in general, so like okra is another one. Going back to the blood sugar, the mucilage, that molecule really likes to bind to the sugar molecule and only slowly release it, if at all. So this is another way of controlling blood sugar, is through mucilaginous foods, because that mucilage will bind to the sugar, preventing it from passing from the digestive tract into the blood. Normally it gets absorbed immediately. You get that big spike and all sorts of problems develop. But with slimy foods, even slippery elm, marshmallow root, wild violets, okra, prickly pear, cactus pad, any of these things that have the mucilage in them help control blood sugar.
So fascinating. I have a lot of homework to do.
Science is awesome.
It really is.
And if you go to the Medicine Man Plant Co., my other website, where I have the different primary herbal primaries, I include all the scientific research papers that I used in the formulating this stuff. So you can actually go and look at the science too.
Amazing. Well, that was actually going to be our next question. So can you talk about what the Medicine Man Plant Co. is?
Okay, so Medicine Man Plant Co., ancient plants for modern illnesses, scientifically supported. The basic formula belief I have with this is, first off, nothing that has been invented more recently than 14,000 years ago. So a lot of the other herbal products have things like magnesium stearate in it, or some sort of BHT, butyl hydroxytoluene preservative. I don't have that. For the few cases where I needed a processing aid to get the powders through the equipment, I found a rice bran extract that has the same physical properties as the magnesium stearate, but it's all natural. Instead of the BHT, butyl hydroxytoluene, the preservative, the antioxidant, one of my formulations, the liver pill, has flaxseed in it. Flaxseed would normally go rancid, but I found a extract from rosemary that keeps it from turning rancid. So things like that. The closest thing to artificial would be the cellulosic fiber capsule that it's packed in, but everything else is natural, scientifically supported plants and mushrooms. I pack it in glass bottles because I don't want anything leaching from the plastic into the mist. And there's been a lot of research lately that maybe this whole plastic packaging thing was not a good idea, because they have found things leach out into what you are then consuming. Yeah, so right now we have 10 products, and we'll be hopefully in January also have 2 products for dogs. Medicine Man
Yay!
and Wolf. Yeah, so I should be getting, so the way I do it, so I actually have a big following. Sorry, I have to push my head back in. Uh, but when I'm ready to try a new formula, I'll have several different formulas made up and say, okay, who has brain fog? Who has high blood pressure? Who has high, blood sugar? Okay, I'm sending you some stuff. Here's exactly what's in it. Here's what you should see. And here's a form. Tell me, do you see this? And is there anything else that makes you go, about it, like that? And then get all the things back and go through and say, okay, this looks like the best formula. And then bring that to market. Same thing going on with dogs here. Like I said, hopefully next week I'll have about 4 formulas to test on the dog arthritis and dog calming formulas, because those seem to be the 2 first things to bring out for Medicine Man and Wolf. So, but again, all natural, 100,000 years of experience and proof of effectiveness. Yeah. But
That's awesome.
sorry, I distracted myself there.
No, all good. We were, looking at the Medicine Man Plant Co. website, and we were like, oh my gosh, there's so many good formulas on there. And this season of Connecting the Dots, just is shaping out to talk a ton about blood sugar and the gut. And you touched already on some really great herbs and plants that can help with blood sugar, but we know that you also have a product for the gut. So wondering if you could talk about the ingredients that you included in that product and how they support your microbiome.
Okay, yeah. So just to go sideways for a second, originally my favorite of my own formulas was the brain pill. It has been replaced by the gut pill.
Ooh.
So the gut pill, 4 components. First off, live Lactobacillus acidophilus bacteria, crucial for proper gut microbiota. Triphalia fruit. Triphalia fruit is a Vedic Indian fruit. It's actually a mixture of 3 fruits that they found to help support, increase, maintain the proper gut bacteria and suppress the bad gut bacteria. So the triphalia, it helps the lactobacillus that's being introduced and also reduce the bad gut bacteria and increase the good stuff. So there's that. There is, I want to make sure, I don't have a bottle of it here. I have to think here. Well, it has the calendula. So the calendula, if your mucosal layer is damaged, one of the problems with that is if you think of your intestinal tract, it's a tremendous amount of surface area. It has all these folds and bends and little closed cul-de-sacs where it's used to transfer food in and out. But if that protective mucosal layer gets damaged, then the digestive juices and the digestive enzymes can now start attacking through these micro holes in it. Also, bacteria and stuff can start building up there in the mucosal layer. There is a natural antibiotic too to help prevent the stuff that you didn't evolve to want. It kills those. The amount of time we could go into antimicrobials and which ones are good and which ones are bad and all that, again, totally different. But so the calendula helps repair the tissue that has been damaged by the digestive juices, by the stomach acid, by an infection. And then there is the marshmallow root, that is the slime. It's been shown to rebuild and fill in where there is not a mucosal layer, where the mucosal layer is missing. I have to be very careful how I describe this stuff so I don't go end up in FDA jail. But again, there's all the scientific papers on how these things are working to do that. And so by maintaining proper gut bacteria and maintaining proper gut structural integrity, you're on top of the world. Because one of the things you probably know, the gut-brain axis. You have neurons that line your stomach, and when they're not happy, you're not happy, and they play a big role in all the other hormones and immune system and all this sort of thing going on. So there's been that has been some of the most rewarding feedback I've gotten from the gut, is I'm just generally feeling better, like emotionally better. It's like, oh, cool. Do the scientist dance then. Yeah.
Oh my God, I love that. I love that so much. It's funny because you're mentioning calendula, and I hadn't heard about it till a few weeks ago, and I've been on a process of healing my gut, and I've been having some skin issues come up. My doctor gave me this calendula cream. My acupuncturist actually made me this calendula olive oil from her garden that's helping, and I'm like, never heard about it, and then I just keep hearing about it. I'm like, there's a sign here. It's saying I need to incorporate more into my daily lifestyle.
That's actually another plant that got me in trouble, if you have time to hear the story.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So I have two daughters, I mentioned, and they were both in ballet. The younger one actually just got back from 5 weeks in New York City with Joffrey Ballet. But when they were younger, being the loving herbalist dad, I noticed that their feet were getting tore up. So I made a calendula salve to apply to their feet to help repair the damage. And then my wife saw that and said, "Wait, what are you doing?" He's like, I'm taking care of their feet." I said, "No, you're screwing up their ability to make calluses that they'll need to go on to the next level." You just have to sit back and let nature take its course. So, but yeah, I was trying to do good, and I discovered I didn't know enough about the whole thing. That's one of the things actually that, again, as an herbalist, we try not just to treat this, we try and look at this, and that right there brought home that lesson to me. The big picture, what is really going on in all aspects of a person's life. So
That's such a cute story.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, it could have been worse.
She caught me early on.
Good intentions. Good intentions.
It's like, hey, I'm being part of their, because otherwise I don't ballet, you know. But
that's so funny. I am curious though, because you mentioned the gut brain connection. Could you talk a little bit about what's in the brain pill and how?
Okay. So in the brains pill, there is what's called 8-to-1 hot water extract of lion's mane mushroom fruiting bodies. The compounds in that have been shown to increase the number of neural connections between the brain cells. So this leads to better problem solving, better memory, creativity, to the point where you can your brain can almost start racing and like everything, ooh, get all these ideas. So there's also sage in it. Sage, just regular culinary sage, is what's called a focusing agent. It helps you stay focused on task. So you can harness all this new brain power to stay focused on the issue you're working on. But now, because you're doing all this brain stuff going on, you need more fuel for the brain. So the third component is ginkgo leaf. Ginkgo leaf has been shown to increase the blood flow to the brain, bringing the oxygen and the glucose you need. So they all work together, supporting each other, giving your brain this power. One of the feedback I get from that is like, I can work all day long. And it's like, well, maybe that's not a good thing, but they say, I don't get that 1:30, 2 p.m. Sort of thing, where I suddenly slam a couple of coffee. I'm just going. It's like, yay, I saved corporate America.
I love that.
Yeah, it's the natural form of Adderall. I also
basically, yeah. But now with long COVID, there's been issues there. And I don't know if you've seen these, but a lot of women, once they get through menopause, brain fog is something they start reporting an issue with. They just can't think as well. And this has to do with some estrogen production and things like that in the brain, or to the brain. But my mom is 87, and she's one of my the people that's getting this stuff, and she's still sharp. So anecdotal evidence, but all the scientific research, again, going back to Japan and the elderly there, the more powerful the brain, the less resources it takes. And so that was some of the research there too. So
yeah, and I think just what I found interesting was the lion's mane. But the first time I actually heard about like foraging things was, yeah, my acupuncturist, her friend forages lion's mane, and she gave it to me. She's like, this will help you, like if you need an afternoon pick me up. And it's been a lifesaver. Like I have a headache, lion's mane, just every time I feel like something wrong, it just like cures it.
The neuron thing is only one part of it. Yeah, and lion's mane grows wild all across North America. It's a wonderful, just eating it, sauteed in butter or bacon grease. In this case, usually butter. They call it the lobster mushroom. Well, there's another mushroom, but it tastes like lobster. So in the book, I have a lion's mane bisque. Instead of a lobster bisque, it's using the lion's mane mushroom. So very tasty. It's tasty and good for your brain.
I don't drink coffee, but I make my boyfriend drink coffee with lion's mane, and I've been putting ginkgo leaf in it, droppers. But now that you have the sage, I'm like, do we add that to his coffee too, or do I just say stop drinking coffee and get the brain pill?
So before I would say yes, get the brain pill. But yeah, well before Medicine Man was ever a thing, I was putting a scoop of sage leaf in my morning coffee grounds every morning, and just adding that, and the flavor actually goes well with the coffee. You kind of have to play with it.
Yeah.
Some, when I say a scoop, in this case, I'm talking more like a quarter of a teaspoon. It doesn't take much, but that really helps focus the energy, so you don't get just kind of jittery, scattery, all that sort of thing. And that's actually leads to another people like the capsules. They're a little large, and usually it's anywhere from 2 to 4 per day, generally taken all at the same time. My most complex formula is the immune pill, and that has 5 components in it. Usually I try and stick to 3, but the amounts of each is based on the scientific research, what the average American, basically between 110 and 210 pounds needs to get that effect. You may see a lot of herbal supplements, they'll have, 10 milligrams of this and 5 milligrams of that, and just a huge list of things. You're throwing your money away. In my opinion, all you legal people out there, in my opinion. But with my stuff, like I said, it's usually somewhere, between 500 milligrams up to 900 milligrams in the total dose, just to get you what science actually says is probably the amount you need to see these effects. So science, I love science. Makes my life easier.
I cannot wait to try your Medicine Man Co. supplements.
If you're doing the brain pill, one other thing. Before you take it, open the bottle and smell it. There's also been some good research showing, especially with sage, the odor of it has all sorts of other mental effects. There's the most direct connection between the outside world and your brain is actually through your nose. Okay. And so there's all sorts of mental things. And I used to have a morning show, and part of it was the group take, where we'd all take our different things, and you had to smell the brain pill before you could take it, because it primes the body. Going back, Melissa and crystals, and I kind of poo-pooed them. They've shown rituals. If you have rituals before you do something, it helps focus the brain and you generally get better results. Athletes are a prime example of this. But developing your own rituals for doing things actually will increase the benefit. And so smelling the brain pill, that was part of the ritual before taking it. So little things like that. scientifically supported.
Our resource guide for this episode is going to be so fruitful. I'm like, we got to have a prickly pear recipe on there. We're going to have a coffee. We're ready. Gonna get some cinnamon in your coffee. I'm obsessed. I love it. This has just been so much fun. We could talk to you forever, but unfortunately we have to hit our rapid fire questions. So our first one is, what's one piece of advice you'd give to someone starting their health journey today?
Walk, and ideally outside. If you can't walk outside, walk inside, but walking. We have a very unique, musculature structure. Walking does all sorts of benefits, from speeding up digestion, helping the liver, helping the immune system, getting the things flowing. Just walk, and ideally outside.
So our next question is, what do you think the future of health looks like?
What a great question. I really think people are going to take more control of their health. It used to be pass it off to the pharmaceutical industry, the doctors, and you got to fix me. And nothing against them, but it seems like most people, they want a pill that they can take that will allow them to keep doing what caused the health issue. I pray that people start realizing, no, maybe I do need to actually do some of these things. I can't just sit on the couch and not do anything. Maybe I really do need to eat better and walk more and drink more and get more sunlight, things like that. That's I'm thinking, especially after coming off the whole COVID disaster and all that, I think people are starting to rethink their own responsibility in health. There's all those that will want someone else to take full responsibility from them. Hopefully those will be fewer and fewer.
Fingers crossed. That's what we hope too. And with our show and all of your resources, hopefully together we make that a little bit easier for people. And so our last question is, since this is Connecting the Dots, can you please tell our listeners how they can connect with you and where they can find Foraging Texas and the Medicine Man Co. and you?
Yeah. So the easiest way nowadays is to go to medicinemanplantco.com, and there's a contact button. Anything sent from that goes directly to me. And so by sending me a question, I automatically assume you're part of my tribe, and I am now your medicine man. And one of the things I do, you both are really young. I don't know if you know the old Christmas movie, A Miracle on 34th Street.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And Santa Claus, a lady comes up and says, the kid wants this thing, and Santa Claus sends her to a different store because this store doesn't have it, but a competitor. And the owner of the store thought that was terrible, but the lady thought that was awesome. That's if I don't have something, I don't care. My goal is to get you healthier. So I will send you wherever you need to go, even if it takes money out of my pocket, because I don't need much to survive. I got a yard. I'm good. I got to kind of have a roof. So, that sort of thing. But yeah, Medicine Man Plant Co. Come to me there. And then from there, you can get to Foraging Texas and see all the plant stuff. But right now, that is the nucleus of everything else.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah, no, this was such a great conversation. I have so many takeaways. I know Kath does. I think this is great for our listeners. So many tangible pieces of information. And yeah.
Like I said, I'm a preacher of cavemenosity. So every preacher loves a new pulpit. So thank you very much for inviting me in to preach to your congregation. Hopefully they got something out of it.
Yes, definitely. I'm sure they did.
Absolutely. I think my boyfriend Luke manifested you at the start of this year when we were, trying to figure out, how many episodes we were going to have and how many guests. He was like, please have someone talk about the caveman life or the carnivore diet, please. Come on. So he is going to be a big fan.
Cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you again.
My pleasure. Have a great day.
You too.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Connecting the Dots. If there was something that resonated with you, or you simply enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend, leave a 5-star rating and written review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you can be the first to know when a new episode is released. And if you'd like to further support us, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow the show on Instagram at connectingthedots.podcast on both platforms. We're also on TikTok at Connecting the Dots Podcast.
We have intentionally curated resource guides that go with every episode to give you the tools, resources, and information you need to make tangible changes at home. You can purchase these guides at kathleencarney.com/resources. If you would like to work with me directly, you can also go to kathleencarney.com/services and book a free discovery call to decide which service is right for you. Make sure you follow me at Kathleen Carney Wellness on Instagram and TikTok.
And I'm Melissa Chamis on Instagram and The Lazy Yogi separated by underscores on TikTok. And we'll link all this information in the show notes to make it easier for you.
We appreciate your continued support and look forward to hanging with you next week.